Welcome back to the Snow Point Cast. Today we're taking a look at a deck from Majestic Dawn to Call of Legends, Gyarados. So Gyarados is another one of the decks that actually gains a lot of tools. This particular list is actually Dustin Zimmerman's list. I just changed a few cards. There's about 4 card changes, and we'll go over those when we get to them. They're just more kind of just little changes that make the deck a little bit better in an item lock meta, because Dalgachomp and Valgar are both really solid decks in this meta. So let's get into the list. So starting off with 4 Magikarps. Obviously you play 4 Carps because you got to get that max damage on Gyarados. So 30 HP, which is kind of low, kind of donk territory, which is unfortunate, but kind of the price you pay for having 130 HP stage 1. So Sea Spray for for free rather. Flip a coin to get tails for each heads draw card. So that's actually really nice. Being able to draw a bunch of cards at a pinch is not bad, especially when you start it. It's like something to do at least. And you play those for Gyarados. So Gyarados 130 HP. Super tanky guy. Tail Revenge is the only attack you're going to be using. So for free, does 30 damage times the number of Magikarp in your discard. The whole point of the deck is just to get Magikarps in your discard, then swing for 90 or more with an expert belt with Gyarados for free, which is just really good value. Then you're also playing 3 Sableye, which have another free attack. That's kind of the theme of the deck. You play energy, but they're not really for attacking. So 60 HP, dark type. The Pokebody is really solid, so Overeager, if Sableye is your active Pokemon at the beginning of the game, you go first. So if you start it, you just get to go first, which is really nice because of the attack. So Impersonate for free, search your deck for a supporter card, discard it, shuffle your deck afterward, then use the effect of that card as the effect of this attack. So essentially you just get to use a supporter on turn 1 from your deck, which is really, really good. It just helps you set up a lot. Collector on turn 1 is just such a good card to set up, and it's usually where you're going to be getting turn 1, and then turn 2 you can do a lot of things depending on what you get, but the turn 1 Collector with Sableye helps you set up a lot. And then speaking of setup, we also play 2 Smeargle. This is a really solid buff that this deck gets in this format. It's another basic attacker that just helps you set up. So 70 HP, colorless type, portraits the power on this guy. So once during your turn before you attack, Smeargle is your active Pokemon. You may look at your opponent's hand. If you do, choose a supporter card you find there and use that card as the effect of this power. So being able to just get a double supporter off in a turn. Let's say you start a Smeargle and you have an Unown Q on the bench. You can go Portrait, Collector, and then, you know, retreat, go Sableye, go double Collector on your first turn, which is kind of crazy if you have that hand. It's kind of a bonkers hand. You need a 3-card combo, but just the ability to use both of those in a turn. You play some switching cards as well in this deck, so being able to use both Portrait and Impersonate in the same turn can be really, really good for your setup. Super, super solid setup option. There's something 2 Uxie, so this is kind of just staple for setup. Uxie, 70 HP, setups the power. So once during your turn, when you put Uxie from your hand into your bench, you may draw cards till you have 7 in your hand. So just really staple in like every deck. Such a good power. And then Psychic Restore for 1 colorless does 20, and you can put Uxie and all cards attached to it at the bottom of your deck in any order. This can be a super useful attack versus Gengar, because Gengar Stormfront, you just one-shot it if you have an expert belt attached. That's really bad for you, because then if they flip a heads on Fainting Spell, it means you die. So something you can do if they don't have like a healing option in play, like a Blissey, is you can go Tail Revenge for 90 and then retreat to the Uxie and then KO with the Uxie and send it to the bottom so that Fainting Spell is not activated. So kind of a cool play you can do there against one of the best decks in the format. It's a super important card for that. They're also playing 1 Mesprit. So Mesprit, used for Psychic Bind, is a really good power. So 70 HP, Psychic Bind. Once during your turn, when you bench Mesprit from your hand, you can use this power. You may use this power, Psychic Bind. Your opponent can't use any Poke powers during their next turn. So being able to lock your opponent on powers, really solid. And then with the addition of Seeker in this format, actually makes this card really, really good. You play it in other variants without Seeker anyway, but with Seeker, when you have the ability to use it multiple times in a game, really easily, when you can just get that supporter card, is very, very solid. You're also playing an Azelf, so your prizes are very important when you rely on Magikarp for damage. So Azelf, 70 HP, Time Walk is the power. Once your turn before you attack, when you bench Azelf, you can look at your prize cards, take a Pokemon card you find there, reveal it, and then put it in your hand, and then take a card from your hand and replace it in your prizes. So not only a really good card for getting any Pokemon prized that you need, especially your Carps, but also just really good to see your prizes. Azelf is a really interesting card because it lets you take your, this is like house rules, but if you play an Azelf and you're playing a casual game, usually people just let you look at the prizes. In a competitive setting, you would write down where your prizes are, but just being able to search your or like draw your prizes when you need them, it can actually be really, really good too, depending on if you have some really important stuff prized. You also play a Crobat. So Crobat's used for Flash Bite, 80 HP, Psychic type. Flash Bite, once on your turn, when you bench Crobat G from your hand, you can put a damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Another Pokemon that's really, really good with Seeker, just being able to reuse this guy for the KO. Another thing that you can do against Gengar is you can go Gyarados, hit for 90, and then Crobat G, Flash Bite, Seeker, Flash Bite again, and then you kill the Gengar without having to worry about feigning spell. So it's also really important for that. Also just important for hitting your numbers. This will play one Unown Question Mark. So this is kind of a Dustin Zimmerman special. I really love this card in this format, and it's kind of a tech against Vilgar, but it really is an effective tech against Vilgar. So Unown Question Mark, 70 HP, which is pretty tanky, honestly, all things considered. Most unknowns are like 50 or 30. So the power is question mark. Once you're in turn before you attack, if Unown Question Mark is on your bench, you may choose a Pokemon in your hand and put that card face down. Your opponent guesses a type of Pokemon. Reveal that card. If your opponent guessed correct or guessed wrong, draw a card. Nothing happens if they guess correctly, but you also play a lot of different types of Pokemon in this deck, right? Like you have Water, Dark, Colorless, Psychic, and then you also play Grass with the Combee. So you have 5 options there, which can just get you 1 draw, which is kind of cute. Not the reason you play the card, but definitely a neat addition to the card. So Hidden Power is the reason you play it. So Hidden Power for free, discard up to 2 cards from your hand, and then for each card you discarded, draw a card. One of the biggest problems in this format against item lock with this deck is getting your Magikarps in the discard. So Felicity's Drawing is a card that used to exist for Gyarados but doesn't exist in this format. Kind of unfortunate, but you have to play some other ways to get around that, and Unown Question Mark is one of those. So you can get some carps in the discard and then also draw while you do that. Another plus that you can get from using Hidden Power is you can potentially discard trainer cards, is if you're versus a trainer lock deck like Dialga or Vilgar especially, that's going to start hitting you for some damage. You may as well get those trainer cards out of your hand, especially when they're unplayable. And then also draw some cards. So Unown Question Mark, super cool support Pokemon. You're also playing an Unown Q. So Unown Q is a mobility card. It's got 30 HP, free retreat, quick. So if Unown Q's on your bench, let's just say we got an Unown Question Mark active. We can do this. Bench Q, activate quick, and then all of a sudden Q is a tool. Q turns into a tool, and then the Pokemon that Q is attached to has 1 less retreat. Since Unown Question Mark has 1 retreat, you can retreat it for free. So just kind of good on especially on a Smeargle, but can be good on an Uxie or Sableye. Keeps you mobile for sure. Fast attacking if you need to do that. And you're also playing 1 Regice. So Regice, 90 HP, super fat retreat. So be careful about this. It's got 3 retreat. You do play 3 Warp Energy and 2 Warp Point. Well, some junk arms, but it is one of your heavy retreaters. So if you're in a matchup where you might get this guy drag up, maybe don't bench it. Kind of depends, but it's also a really good way to discard Pokemon. So Regi Move is the power. So once your turn before you attack, you may activate this power. Discard 2 cards from your hand. If you do, if your opponent has a active basic Pokemon, they have to. I think you force them to move. When your opponent's active Pokemon isn't evolved, then yeah. So essentially you discard 2, and then if your opponent has a basic, they have to switch. So it's good for discarding carps, obviously, really great for that, but also good for forcing your opponent out of the active to switch. I mean, if they have a Regigigas in the active or like a Dialga in the active, and you just don't want to deal with that because attacking into it just doesn't make sense, you can use a Warp Point or use Regi Move, and then force them to move out of the active. So that's great. And then also discarding carps. So just a kind of a multi-use card there. And then also you play 1 Combee. So Combee is really, really solid. So 50 HP. Actually, I'm going to look up the attack. This guy's in Japanese, so I don't know what the attack says, but it is colorless, so you can use it. But Honey, so when you bench Combee from your hand to your bench, you can choose a Pokemon from your discard pile, a basic Pokemon from your discard pile, and put it onto your bench. So that's mainly good for returning a Magikarp to your hand. In order to attack with Gyarados for the max power, you have to have all 3 Magikarps in the discard, and then the other one is under the Gyarados. And then with that, it kind of makes it dicey, because if you're item locked and then they kill your Gyarados, then you don't really have recovery cards, but Combee is that recovery card that kind of gets around item lock. So it just lets you put that Magikarp into the bench, and then with Broken Time Space, you can just drop down a Gyarados and then all of a sudden be attacking again. Especially with Seeker, Honey is really, really solid. But Alert, so Alert is the attack. So for 1 colorless, draw a card, then you may switch Combee with one of your bench Pokemon. So I guess that's okay if you start Combee for sure and you have an energy. So draw a card is not bad, and switch I guess is fine. But yeah, it's not so bad honestly, because you put a Warp Energy on it and then you're gonna be Seekering it later, so you get that back, which is honestly not that bad of an attack. Okay, so getting into the trainer cards, starting with 4 junk arms. So with Felicity's Drawing gone, you have to play more outs to discard your Magikarps. So Unown and Regice are obviously 2 really good options, but having some other options is really good as well. So Junk Arm, discard 2 cards from your hand, search your deck, discard pile for a trainer card, show it to your opponent, and put it in your hand. So really good for discarding Magikarps, but also just really good because you play a lot of very useful trainer cards in this deck. And it can let you go really, really aggro. One of the really nice parts about Junk Arm as well is it discards cards from your hand, obviously. But because of that, your Uxies become more powerful. You can discard a bunch of cards. If you have double Junk Arm, you go double Junk Arm, go down to like 1, and then Uxie set up for 6, and then all of a sudden you're having a crazy hand where you're taking cards out of your discard and then also drawing like 6 cards in a turn before you even use a supporter card. So great at that. Also great late game recovery. Another thing Junk Arm can turn into is supporter cards, because you do play a VS Seeker, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But moving on to 4 Poké Turn. This is only for picking up your Crobat. Crobat's a really big damage card, especially against Vilegar. So, I mean, if you can take it a Vileplume or stop Vilegar from getting off their trainer lock before it, because these are obviously trainers, they can't be played under trainer lock. But if you can, it just makes the matchup so much easier, because then you can do that play I was talking about before, where you go bench Crobat and then Seeker Crobat, bring it back. But you can just do that with Poké Turn. And then you just knock out the Gengar, which is really nice. But also just being able to get your numbers up, right? I mean, some Pokemon have 130 HP or more. So being able to push over the top with Crobat and Expert Belt and Junk Arm, especially letting you reuse Poké Turn, can add up really, really quickly and have a lot of bonus damage in one turn. Speaking of bonus damage, you also play 2 Expert Belt. So I think this is one of the differences in the lists. I cut 3 Super Scoop Up from Dustin's list, and then I also cut what else did I cut? Let me just see. I cut 3 Super Scoop Ups, and I cut 1 Pokemon Communication. Mostly because I think, Super Scoop Up is fine, but it's also like, 1, it's a flip, and I hate flip cards. I don't even play Super Scoop Up in my 2009 Gyarados that I have built right now, just because I just hate Scoop Up cards, and there's better options, especially in this deck when you have Warp Energy. So what I did is I cut 3 Super Scoop Ups, and I cut a Pokemon Communication. I added in a Bebe search instead of the Communication, because I just think that, having supporter-based Pokemon search, especially when you need to find Gyarados, it's just better. And then also, I added 1 Poké Turn as well. So Dustin was only running 3, so I'm running 4 Poké Turn. And then an Expert Belt was one of the other cards that I got into as well. I also put a Warp Energy, which we'll get into when we get to Seeker. But the second Expert Belt is mostly just so you can attach it early. Because if you can get it down on, turn 1 before you get item locked, if that's a thing, by Dialga or Vilegar, then it makes your later game a little bit easier because you're swinging for more damage. And then also, just hitting it is good. You have to play Junk Arm, so you don't need to play 3, I don't think, because you can return them if you need to. But I think 1 is a little bit low, so I think 2 is like the perfect number. It just buffs your HP by 20, and then buffs your attacks by 20 damage, and then the Pokemon this card is attached to becomes an EX Pokemon, essentially. So you take 2 prizes if you're able to knock it out. But I think 2 is like a really good number, and it helps a lot, especially like to get those early aggro KOs that this deck really, really needs. Just playing 2 Warp Point. So these also kind of help with the early KOs, helps you get to switch into the active. So your opponent switches one of her defending Pokemon with one of his or her bench Pokemon. So they're defending Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. They get to choose, and then you switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So being able to get the Sableye or the Smeargle out of there into a Gyarados or whatever else you want to put up, another Sableye or whatever. The mobility is just really, really nice. And then also, like I was saying before, if you don't want to have to swing into whatever your opponent has active and you're power locked or whatever, you can just force your opponent to switch with this, which is really nice. And with 4 Junk Arm, you have access to this a lot in the game. Okay, so also playing 1 Luxury Ball, kind of a staple in every Gyarados list. Is just such a good card. Search your deck for a Pokemon, excluding Pokemon level X, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, and then you can't use Luxury Ball if you have another one in your discard, so that's why you only play 1, but it essentially just searches any Pokemon in the deck for nothing. You just don't have to pay anything and you get a Pokemon. So great Pokemon search. You have to play this in every Gyarados list. Also playing 1 Pokemon Communication. So take a Pokemon from your hand, shuffle it into your deck, and then search your deck for a Pokemon and find it and put it in your hand. So being able to take any Pokemon, you play a lot of different Pokemon that are useful at different points in the game. Like, let's say, for example, you're in the mid-game, and you already have Magikarps in your discard from a Junk Arm or whatever. You don't really need a Regice. You can put the Regice back and get something else. Or your support Pokemon are more early-game Pokemon as well, so you can kind of put those back if you don't need them. And you play so many Pokemon that this, as a one-of, almost always is able to be used. Just playing a Bubble Coat. This is another one of Dustin's special cards that I actually really, really enjoy. I think Bubble Coat is you have to play it in this deck, I think, in this meta, because Junk Arm just makes it too good. You have access to multiple Bubble Coats a game. So Bubble Coat is a tool. As long as Bubble Coat is attached to a Pokemon, that Pokemon has no weakness. If that Pokemon is damaged by an opponent's attack, discard this card at the end of the turn. So you can just slap it on a Gyarados, and then until it gets hit by weakness, or until it gets attacked, rather, it just stays on there. So really clutch, especially against Luxray GL level X. That's one of your big contenders in this format. Luxray is still a pretty good card in this format. So being able to stop the weakness there, especially when you have multiple turns to do that, can absolutely swing that matchup. I think if you get even 2 Bubble Coats off in a game, it puts you in such a better position to win that game if you're trading evenly. Because usually how the deck works is you go trade, 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 and you're usually just trading back and forth. But with Bubble Coat, it kind of slows that trade down and lets you hopefully get in the lead with that. So Bubble Coat, great card, and I love that card in this list. Just playing one Pokemon Rescue, staple for every Gyarados list. You only play one because you play Combee, and I think Seeker Combee is just more consistent. This is a trainer card, right? So you don't have access to it at all times if you're trainer locked, but you still play one because it's just still a good card. And with Junk Arm, you might need to use it at some other points in the game, especially versus a non-trainer locked deck. You're also playing one VS Seeker, like I was talking about before. So with VS Seeker, search your discard pile. I guess Pokemon Rescue just takes a Pokemon out of your discard pile, pretty obvious. Search your discard pile for a supporter card versus Seeker. Show it to your opponent and put it in your hand. So with that, Junk Arm and versus Seeker, if you get a VS Seeker in the discard early, Junk Arm can turn into VS Seeker, and then all of a sudden that can be a draw supporter. So really, really good card to get in the discard early because they make all your Junk Arms essentially live supporter cards. Which is really, really useful for sure into the late game when you draw those. I was playing 4 Broken Time Space. So this is kind of a staple card for this deck as well. You need to be able to evolve and attack really fast, especially when, you know, you have 3 Magikarps in a discard, a 1/1 line attacking, it goes down. You're not going to just bench the Magikarp and be like, well, I hope he doesn't hit me next turn, because a million decks have ways to, you know, snipe for 80 or hit 30 or whatever. So being able to just go bench that or bring it back with the Combee, and then Broken Time Space, evolve into Gyarados into the same turn, and then just keep on swinging is really, really nice. And I think you really need this card just to be able to. It also lets you just pop off on turn 1, right? Like with Junk Arm and stuff. If you happen to have a luxury ball, Junk Arm for a luxury ball, you know, take some stuff. It depends on what your hand is, but there are some turns where you can get some crazy turn 1s with Gyarados if you draw the right stuff off Uxie or get a good Smeargle off. Okay, so we're going to the supporter cards. We're playing 4 Pokemon Collector. So Pokemon Collector, really solid card. Oh, geez. Drop my phone there. So Pokemon Collector, search your deck for 3 basic Pokemon cards, show it to your opponent and put it in your hand. So really great. Honestly, just a broken supporter. One of the best supporters I think that has been printed in terms of setup. So you can get 3 Carps. You can get, you know, a Sableye and 2 Carps. It really depends what your board is and what your hand is, but being able to find any combination of Pokemon, Uxie to draw, Combee to bring Pokemon back, Regice to discard Pokemon, Azelf if you have a Carp prized, Mesprit to lock, Q to be mobile, Unown Q if you're up against a Valgar. Really in any position, being able to search 3 basic Pokemon in this deck is really, really good. The only thing this doesn't find is your Gyarados, which you play other supporters to find as well. So really, really solid card. Love Pokemon Collector. You're also playing 3 Seeker. So Seeker, each player takes one of their bench Pokemon and all cards attached, puts it into his or her hand. So I think Seeker is one of the reasons that I was okay cutting Super Scoop Ups from Dustin's list. And because I added the Warp Energy, with Seeker you can go like this. You keep a Pokemon on all cards attached, right? So let's say you have a Broken Time Space in play. You're attacking with a Gyarados, and they swing into you for like 70. You don't really want to go down because you have an Expert Belt, and you might go down next turn. So what you can do is you go Warp Energy. When you attach Warp Energy to your active, it forces you to switch to the bench. So you go Warp, put like a Smeargle up is really beneficial to you because then you get to use Portrait. Use Seeker. Take the Gyarados and the Warp Energy back into the hand, and then if you have Broken Time Space, you can just put that all back down again, except for the Warp Energy, which you obviously would rather keep, because then if you have another Seeker or a VS Seeker, you can get the Seeker again and then heal again. So you can actually loop this card 8 times total with the deck if you need to, because the Warp Energy goes back to your hand, right? So you have 8 healing options if you have access to your Junk Arm and versus Seeker, which is so deadly. Like having a Gyarados swinging for 110 or more with Crobat, it is just so deadly when they also have the option to just go Warp Energy, Seeker, put it all back down, attack again in the same turn, and also are portraiting to use a real supporter to set up in that same turn. So Seeker, I think, is an insane card in this deck. Really, really solid addition to Gyarados in this format. So also play 2 Bebe search. So this is kind of your Gyarados search that's not Luxury Ball or Pokemon Communication. So just to have some non-trainer based Pokemon search is nice because trainer lock is a really big deal in this format. So you play 2, you know, most lists play 1, but I think I upped it to 2 just because I am a little bit afraid of trainer lock. I think either Vialgar or Dialga are the best deck in the format. It's kind of, you know, to be decided, but Bebe search helps with both of those matchups a lot. So just being able to search those Gyarados is really good. It can be good for getting any Pokemon out, though. It is definitely just a solid card. They're also playing 1 Cyrus Conspiracy. So this is another Dustin special. I think in this list, this card is super good because I'm going to post Dustin's article on Gyarados. It's a great read, super good read. So we wrote an article about Gyarados in this format. And one of the things that he said about Cyrus in that article is that you can impersonate Cyrus, grab a Poké Turn, and a Twins. So Twins is another really good card that you can get. So Cyrus, search your deck for a supporter card, a energy card, a basic energy card, and a trainer card that has Team Galactic's invention in his name. So this is the only card you can grab with that. And you can grab these ones depending on what your hand is. You might want to grab these, but one of the reasons that grabbing Twins is so good, that Dustin was saying in his article, is that if you have a Sableye attacking, let's say you use Cyrus Conspiracy, you grab a Poké Turn and a Twins, now all of a sudden you have a 3-card combo set up in your hand if Sableye goes down. So if the Sableye dies, then all of a sudden you can go, you know, I'm going to Twins for a Crobat and an Expert Belt. And then I'm going to go Expert Belt on the Gyarados, Crobat, Poké Turn. And all of a sudden I'm swinging for 130 off of a Sableye on the turn 2 if I have the Magikarps in the discard. So really, really solid card to just be able to search out Twins there. Twins, if you're down on prizes, lets you search for any 2 decks in... and any 2 cards in your deck, rather, and then put them in your hand. So really cool card. And I think that combo is a really neat... That's one of the things, you know, I'm a bit of a list builder myself, and I think this is one of those things that you come to after testing with the deck for a long time. This is very clearly a found after testing, because it's just like, so maybe he just had it off the bat, but it's so good. Like, it's such a good play that I'm sure Dustin at some point was like, you know, I'm Sableyeing, but I don't really want to get Bebes or Seeker or Collector. I kind of want to just set up for next turn. So these 2, in terms of that, is so good. And I love that combo in this deck. Such a neat part of this deck that you have with Twins, because Twins is only existent in this format, not existent in 2010. Really neat part of this deck. Like that a lot. Shout out to Dustin for that neat part in this deck. They're also playing 4 Rescue Energy. So Rescue Energy, when it's attached to one of your Pokemon, when that Pokemon is knocked out, you put all that Pokemon, not all cards attached, but put the whole Pokemon line in your hand. So let's say you attach it onto Gyarados. That's the #1 thing that you're going to want it on. Then when the Gyarados dies, you can just put it back in your hand, and then with Broken Time Space, you drop it all back down. That's another one of the reasons you don't need so many Pokemon Rescue. Usually the deck plays 4, but with Rescue Energy and Seeker, and it's just not that, and Combee, like Combee and Seeker, it's just not that big of a deal because you have a lot of Pokemon return in terms of that. And you're also playing 3 Warp Energy. So this is another one of the additions that I changed up. Dustin was just playing 2, but I think a 3rd Warp Energy is actually really good because it lets you do that play with Seeker that I was talking about earlier. So being able to go Warp Energy when you attach it to your active Pokemon, forces you to switch with one of your bench Pokemon. So you can go attach to a Gyarados, switch to Smeargle. You can even Portrait first if you have a Seeker in your hand. Because then if your opponent has a Seeker, it really depends on what your board is, right? If you don't have a Seeker in your discard, I'd probably play your own Seeker first, because then your VS Seekers are live for it. But being able to Seeker and then take the Gyarados and all cards attached is a great healing option. And then another reason the Warp is so good is just because it keeps your Pokemon mobile. It makes the Smeargle Sableye combo a little bit stronger as well. But yeah, mostly for the healing. I think that the main part is that you can combo it with Seeker and then have that consistent healing against Trainer Lock, which is really, really solid. Okay, well, this has been Gyarados for the Majestic Dawn to Call of Legends format. It's pretty much Dustin's list. I made a couple card changes, but this is his skeleton that I just changed a couple cards on. Really, really neat list from Dustin there. I will be linking the 6 prizes article in the comments if you want to give that a read. It's a really, really good read. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.